What is the impact of the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Welcome to the Libertarian Angle. I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
Good to be with you and our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. If you're brand new to FFF, first exposure with this video, come and visit us at fff.org for around 34 years of solid, no compromise, principled essays on liberty and videos and other perspectives. And subscribe to our daily FFF Daily, which we strive to make the best newsletter or journal on the internet on a daily basis. I think we've been putting that out for about 20 years. So, Richard, big news, good news. It's always nice to get good news in the libertarian movement, and that is the release of Julian Assange from that high security British dungeon, really, that he was in, where it was pretty clear that he ran the risk of just dying in prison, which, of course, would not have disappointed U.S. officials. In fact, I think they would have preferred that to bringing him back for trial. But a deal was struck after many, many years. As you know, the case starts out with Assange working at WikiLeaks, an organization that he founded, and they get all of these videos and emails and other evidence of the national security state's dark side activities. Among the most the biggest ones, the most notorious ones, was the video that came to be known as collateral murder, showing Air Force or Army people firing on innocent people, killing innocent people from a helicopter. It was just nightmarish. And that got released to the world. And of course, the national security state just went ballistic. I mean, just went ballistic. And so the government ends up targeting Assange, who's not an American citizen, with a violation of the Espionage Act, which was enacted in World War I, in which they used to go after people who were protesting conscription during World War I. They never took it off the books, and so they said, "Oh, well, we'll just bring it out and use it against Assange." And we're trying to their very best to extradite him from Great Britain after some kind of sham deal that they had been brought. The Swedish government was bringing some kind of sham sex violations, and so Assange had taken refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, where he was like there for 8 or 9 years or so.
He was there for, if I remember correctly, 7 years at
7
least.
years. So then he loses that, though. There was a change of administrations in Ecuador. And so the Ecuadorian government gave British officials the permission to come in and grab him. So they put him in Belmarsh prison, high security prison, where the U.S. tries to extradite him to stand trial for espionage and releasing their dark side secrets. And that really was what this was all about. It's never about spying. It was that they did not like their dark side secrets to be revealed. And so their intent here was not only to lock him up for around 170 years, but also to really just destroy his life in the process. So the longer Assange could delay the extradition, really the worse off he was health-wise, because he was having to spend all the time waiting for the extradition matter to be decided in Belmarsh prison. So he was effectively jailed anyway, but finally, a deal is struck, and it really goes to show you the power of public opinion. Because, I mean, over year after year after year, countless people were coming to his defense based on First Amendment freedom of the press. I maintain that it was really a freedom of the speech case, but we can talk about that later. But finally, because of all this pressure, the Biden administration agrees to a deal where they let Assange plead guilty to one of a federal judge in one of their imperial outposts in the North Mariana Islands, a federal judge there. Who knew that the U.S. empire extended to the North Mariana Islands? And so, as part of the deal, Assange has to plead guilty after all of these years that he's been claiming innocence, he's put in a very bad position. If you want out of prison and you don't want to be extradited, you're going to have to plead guilty to a felony. And of course, Assange, who was married when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, has not seen the light of day for, I don't know, umpteen years, said, I'll take the deal. And so he flies off to the North Mariana Islands, pleads guilty, flies back to his home country of Australia, where he's been free. What do you think about the case, Richard?
I think that, well, there's a variety of things many of you have touched on, but I think one of the most important things in this is that what is the issue in this from the US government's point of view? The release of what they consider classified information without permission. What gets lost in this, and which caused the United States government both the embarrassment and the insistence upon revenge on him, was the content of this. Now, notice a couple of things before I talk about that. He's not working for a foreign government, right? Espionage usually is country A is in some either cold or hot conflict with country B, and country A hires someone either out of ideology or national identity or for money to get secrets from out of the government of country B to give an advantage to the government of country A. That's the usual way we think of espionage, either in war or out of war. He didn't do that. He didn't sell it to any government. He wasn't serving some foreign master. He was merely releasing this information to the general public on the WikiLeaks site. And that's what outraged the US government, because it showed them in the worst light that America, that portrays itself as the defender of liberty, the guardian of freedom around the world, the securer of the innocent from villains and aggressors, was itself operating through its military personnel as mere murderers. Maybe some people remember, isn't it the scene in Apocalypse Now? I think it's Apocalypse Now, the movie, where Martin Sheen is on the helicopter being taken to wherever he's going, and these soldiers on the helicopter are just shooting down people and animals and saying, yeah, yeah. And this is what was being shown, not just as a movie, but as innocent civilians being shot at from a helicopter. And that's what they didn't want, because it shows the reality of what the US government can do and permits its personnel to do without consequences. That is why he had to be punished. As you said, the dark side of America's military activities and diplomatic presence around the world, and what it can lead to. And you notice that wasn't ever talked about. That what was being shown was what was important, and that he really hadn't committed an act of espionage in the normal commonsensical way, as I tried to explain, we normally think of it, in the service of a foreign government. But they had to use that device to make a lesson of him. And that's why they hounded him for all these years and ran after him for when they got him out of the Ecuadorian embassy into that prison in Britain, and to sort of keep him there until they could try to extradite him back to the United States, where, as you say, he would have given a far longer, probably life sentence, is because they have to set the signal. Anyone who does this, releasing information that is an embarrassment to the United States government in terms of its diplomatic or its military activities around the world, will be punished to the extent that their life will be destroyed. That's a warning to you. The same way Snowden had to run off first to Hong Kong and then to Russia, a country which I presume, though he may have taken refuge in, he ideologically has no sympathy with, in the sense that he believes in the opening of secrets, and we all know that Putin keeps his own secrets. But this is what the United States government does, and this is what this is about. It is that the empire must never be questioned. Its actions may never be revealed unless the government wants them to be revealed, and anyone who attempts to do so will bear the full consequence of the power of the United States government, regardless of where they are, anywhere on this planet. And that itself is a definition of the presumption that the United States government is the headquarters of a global empire that its presence can be and has been and will be felt anywhere that the government deems it necessary and desirable. And lo, the person who goes against them, because their fate will be like Julian's, at least having to admit an admission of guilt, which he didn't do. He at least was able to shorten what would have been a life sentence and at least be home in his home country, where he at least can breathe free there.
Yeah, I think your point about the message is so powerful and so correct that you see, they were, even though Assange was stalling them all these years, they were really winning. The US was winning because they have to send a message to every single other person that ever acquires information, especially people on the inside, like Snowden was on the inside, Assange was on the outside. But Manning, the soldier that gave WikiLeaks this information, he was on the inside. He was a soldier. They have to send a message to every single would-be leaker. This is what's going to happen to you. We will destroy you. We will do exactly what we've done to this guy and what we've done to Snowden to you if you dare to do this. And that's the message they have to send. And I think what happened here, Richard, is that when the U.S. got converted to a national security state in the late 40s, everything changed, because you don't see these types of things happen in the 1800s with respect to, you know, the massacre of people. And if they do happen, they're the exception. They're not the rule. Now they're the rule. They're an established part of America's governmental system. Assassination is an established part. They just assassinated that Iranian general just a couple of years ago. It's just normalized. It's a normalized part of the governmental system when it never was before the establishment of a national security state. And I think that what happened when the national security state came into existence, the idea was, and this was to fight the communists who were supposedly coming to get us. The idea was an implicit pact with the American people that said, we need to keep you safe by exercising dark side powers. We're going to have to do a lot of nefarious things, including things like the helicopter collateral murder and torture and killing of villages like in Vietnam and so forth, like My Lai and all the other My Lais that they kept secret. But we understand that the American people have consciences. And so to relieve you of your consciences, we will keep it secret. Whatever we do, we will keep secret from y'all. So you just vest us with this power. We'll keep you safe and we'll do all these dark side things. And so what happens, I think, is somebody like Snowden comes along, or Assange or Manning or something, they violate the pact. And they need to be dealt with, because people were clearly outraged about this. The American people, who would have preferred not to know. I think many people just says, we don't want to know about this. Do what you need to do. We don't care what you do, but don't tell us about it. We don't want to be made aware of it. And I think that's one of the reasons they were so angry at Assange and Snowden. They violated the pact. They let the American people know about these dark side activities. Now, let me just say something about this plea of guilty. You know, in every federal courtroom, the federal judge is prohibited, absolutely prohibited, from accepting a guilty plea from an innocent person. You're not supposed to do this. You never accept a guilty plea from somebody who's claiming he's innocent. So they had to go through a charade here. And that's one of the reasons why in every guilty plea, the judge asked the defendant a number of questions. Are you pleading guilty because you really are guilty, or for some other reason? That's the central question, but it's not the only question. He really wants to know whether there's something going on here. Is somebody being blackmailed? Is somebody being threatened? He wants to make sure that this really is a legitimate guilty plea. And so here's Assange, who for years and years has been saying, I'm innocent. I'm innocent. I mean, that's why he's fighting the whole extradition proceeding, and people have been saying he's innocent. So clearly they have to arrange a charade, because the judge is going to have to go. And I haven't read a transcript of what happened there in the North Mariana Islands in that federal court, but my hunch is that the judge went through the charade of saying, "Are you guilty? Are you pleading guilty because you really are guilty?" And everybody knows it's a charade because Assange is having to lie. Assange is having to say, "Yes, I really am guilty," when he knows he's not guilty. It wasn't like he just changed his mind and said, "I'm a guilty person." The only reason he's pleading guilty is to get out of jail and get back to Australia. But they have to go through this charade. Now, there was a way out of this that they could have done it, and I don't know whether Assange's lawyer tried to negotiate it, but there's a plea called no contest or nolo contendere, where you go in there and you plead nolo contendere, which says, "I'm not pleading guilty, but I don't contest the charges." It operates as a guilty plea, but it gives the defendant the legitimacy of saying, "I don't admit your charges. I'm just not going to contest your charges." And that's really how this should have handled. That would have been a second best alternative. The best alternative is they should have just dismissed the charges, Richard. I mean, this guy should never have been brought up on charges in the first place. That would have been the right thing to do. And that's how you know this government is just a corrupt government. To go in there and force a guy to plead guilty when they know he's claiming he's innocent, to have a charade of a judicial proceeding where you take a guilty plea that you know is false, and a federal judge is going along with this charade, that is one crooked and corrupt system.
Yeah, if again, to go back to the point that you first made and that I was trying to elaborate on about what's important in this kind of thing is what it revealed in the actions of American military personnel. Why should this be viewed as shocking that American military personnel should clearly be firing upon unarmed civilians? Because it's viewed as against proper military conduct, even in times of war. Why? Well, that's because of the United States government. Now, probably most viewers or listeners on our show here have never heard the name Francis Leiber. Francis Leiber was a German American who came to the United States in the 1820s. He actually, as a 16-year-old boy, was wounded in the Battle of Waterloo against Napoleon. But he came to the United States. He was the first editor of the Encyclopedia Americana. And for 20 years, he was first a professor at the University of South Carolina, and then the first professor of political science at Columbia University in New York. But why am I mentioning him? Because in the midst of the American Civil War, he was approached by the Lincoln administration to prepare the first rules and guidelines for the rules of war that the Union Army was expected to abide by. And he did. And it became the basis for all of the Hague Conventions in the late 19th and early 20th century on the rules of war. How do you treat prisoners of war? How do you treat civilians? Both their persons and their property. And they're to be inviolable unless the person is clearly serving to support the actions of the enemy belligerent. The treatment as neutral, doctors, nurses, charitable representatives, serving the civilian populations who are being caught in the middle and over which you have jurisdiction because you've occupied and conquered this territory. Even the rules of war, what type of forms of conduct are permitted in a battle and which not. He laid them out to begin with. These rules, the idea of rules of war, are due to the United States government hiring Francis Leiber to write them. And what has the United States government chosen to do for at least the last 80 years? Certainly, even going back, I suppose you would go back to the Spanish-American War and the treatment of the Filipinos there, but certainly since the Second World War. And that is to view that you're in a total war where there's no longer a distinction between civilians and combatants. You just view everyone as an enemy, and you just bomb, you kill, you presume that everyone is guilty unless you can somehow justify viewing them as an innocent. That explains what happened in the prisons in Iraq. That explains the treatment of prisoners in Guantanamo Bay. That represents the type of instances that Julian pointed out with the release of those photographs. The United States has become one of the world's greatest violators of its own rules of war, which it originated in the midst of the American Civil War in the 1860s.
Yeah, because we're dealing with different generations of people. I mean, there's look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, they just targeted civilians en masse with those two atomic bombs. And it's interesting that people can see the problem with My Lai, with William Calley just indiscriminately, he and his men indiscriminately killing women and children that weren't even armed. People can see the wrongfulness of that because he's killing civilians, but they can't see the wrongfulness of dropping two atomic bombs, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians. And as it turns out, My Lai in Vietnam, Nick Turse wrote a great book on this called "Anything That Moves." Turns out My Lai was not just a one-time event; that he came across all these records that the military had been keeping that had been kept secret, showing that there were dozens, if not more, of My Lais. And so this is just standard fare, but the hypocrisy of it is that, you see, it's never I think it was dozens, I should say, maybe it was less than dozens, but it was much more that Terse outlined there. But I mean, it shows you the hypocrisy of this government, because the government lectures other regimes about war crimes and dark side activity, when really they're the
Crimes
worst.
against humanity and everything else.
Yeah, they're the worst violators, Richard. Now, I think it's worth mentioning also this notion of freedom of the press, because that was the big thing the many defenders of Assange were saying, especially people on the left, that he's like a newspaper. He's like a newspaper. If the New York Times had done this, nothing would have happened. That why shouldn't he have the same press rights as the New York Times or Washington Post? I don't see it like that at all. I see it as a freedom of speech issue. You come across dark side activities as a citizen, you got a right to release them. I don't care whether you're a journalist or not. If somebody came and said, "Here, Jacob, I'm giving you this video of this dark side activity," I got a right to release it, whether I'm a journalist or not, Richard. And I think it's very dangerous to talk in terms of this distinction of freedom of speech and freedom of the press, because people that do acquire information like this that are not in the journalist profession might be scared. Oh my gosh, I'm not a journalist, I better keep this thing under wraps. It's a freedom of speech issue, not a freedom of the press issue.
Right. And you see the whole thing with his release of these, particularly the videos from Iraq, is that you can't accuse him as some people in Congress and others have said, he was endangering the lives of American personnel in the battlefield. Really? How? Was he releasing battle plans? Was he releasing information about the location and the personnel at a Army or Air Force depot behind lines that would enable, quote, the enemy to attack precisely? No, he was just releasing information and videos about the conduct of U.S. military personnel in the past in a particular location in a country where America was in combat. That's all he did. He did not put one American life in danger in the way we usually see it. Now, you talked about the Vietnam War. It was a rule in the Vietnam War. Usually it's used this in general, is that you see, you're embedded with American military personnel as they were in Vietnam. And obviously they were seeing everything. They were all around here. And there was there was the unwritten rule among American journalists in Vietnam that regardless of what you wrote about and how much you became critical of what the US was doing and would tell stories about this, what you didn't do is you didn't release information prior in any way that would affect the lives of American personnel in combat itself. Okay, that was just a rule that they followed in Vietnam, as I understand it. He didn't threaten anybody's life in the American armed forces by releasing this. What he did is he showed the US government's dirty laundry in public. And that's what his crime was.
That's exactly what his crime was. The nice thing is that he's out, but Richard, I think we need to really recognize what's going on here too from a political standpoint. I mean, this guy's been in jail for how many years, and is it just a coincidence that he's released on the eve of the November elections? I don't think so. I think there's something to be said that maybe somebody's trying to gain the support of people on the left and libertarians that have long been calling for this release of Assange. I think the same thing is happening with respect to Ross Ulbricht, the guy that was involved with the Silk Road website, a case that's extremely important for libertarians. There's promises from Trump coming out saying, "Oh, well, if you'll elect me, I'll do this," and it's really so unsavory. It to me, it's really no different from how they promise welfare to people. That right before the election, it's and how Latin American rulers do the same thing. They start, oh, well, I'm going to promise you this, and then they start building roads and they start giving people grants or promising these things. And I think that's what's going on here too. I don't think it's a really good faith effort to do the right thing. I think it's
No,
all
I agree with you. I
politics.
mean, this is, besides our own election, there is very, very soon coming in a parliamentary election in Great Britain. And of course, both the Conservative and Labour parties have to present themselves to the public. The Conservatives desperate to have any chance of keeping any seats in Parliament. The Labour Party want to make sure that gets its vast majority since they seem to be a shoo-in. But if you listen to what their planks are, or what their representatives say, or what the two heads of their party say, it's like a poker game in which they're one-ing up each other. Well, I'll raise you another this. No, I'll raise you another that before the jackpot, and you show your cards. And then this is the election thing. I'll give you this. Oh no, I'll give the people that. No, I'll give the people even more. And then you show your cards, and the cards is what happens on election day. And who rakes in the whole pot of having won it? This is what this is.
Yeah. What's that saying about an advanced auction on stolen goods?
Yes.
That's what an election is.
That's right. I mean, it's Bastiat's idea of legalized plunder. It's all legalized plunder. And as he said, everybody trying to live at someone else's expense. And all the political parties do, whether it be in Britain or the United States or anyone else, are outbidding each other to bribe people with goodies if only they'll vote for them on election day so they have the power for the period that they're in office.
Okay, on that very realistic insight, we'll wrap things up. Thank you all very much for tuning in for the latest Libertarian Angle. Come and visit us at fff.org. Subscribe to our daily, and of course, support our work with a donation. Richard, I greatly enjoyed the visit and look forward to talking to you next week.
Until next time.